I've been in this game way too long to know that things happen for a reason. And when a story is this big, there's a reason why. Nothing this big happens organically. And if it does, it's extremely rare. So let me just give you a couple data points here. This situation in Minnesota, specifically with the Somali daycares, this has been on the radar for more than 4 years, actually. In fact, if you go back to 2020, it was Project Veritas that broke this story. And they went to the centers and they exposed the fraud. So you could even argue that this is an older story. Now, Nick Shirley, who is re-breaking it now and going back on the ground and really blowing this thing wide open on a national level, he recently got an award from Project Veritas. So I don't know if there was a collab there or anything, but Project Veritas had this story in 2020. And did you know about that? Did you hear about that? Why now is it causing all the fuss and the ruckus? And why didn't it in 2020? It's a fair question to ask. I think somebody wants us to look at this and somebody wants us to talk about this. And the usual why is a distraction. But let's put that aside for a second. And let's talk about selective outrage. And so this is one of my pet peeves, and I'll admit this, and I think that it drives other people crazy, but it drives me crazy. Selective outrage. There is no doubt that this fraud in Minnesota and all the other fraud that's being exposed now is a huge problem, and there should be an extreme response to it. We should see mass arrests, and we should see mass deportations, and quite frankly, we should see mass reform as far as these things shouldn't exist. They shouldn't even have the opportunity to exist. So we need some level of massive reform to deal with this as well. But if you think the Somali fraud situation is, you always hear this big talk about foreign policy and foreign aid and people trying to, fractionalize it and say, well, it's this percentage or it's not that big of a deal. Well, you realize that the Somali fraud operation is like barely anything compared to the overall fraud that the United States American taxpayer has had to deal with. We're going to be $40 trillion in debt next year, folks. And most of that is based off of fraud. And we're not just talking about money laundering or theft or just outright fraud like we're seeing in Minnesota. We're talking about fraud that leads to massive foreign aid, like weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East. That costs us trillions of dollars. We're talking about little weird pork projects, special interest projects that they shove into these omnibus bills, these defense authorization bills that cost us trillions of dollars.